Information shared on the following program is for general information purposes only. It does not constitute legal, tax, investment, or other advice, nor is it intended to recommend any particular investments, products, or financial instruments. Always seek advice from your financial advisor, attorney, or accountant with regard to investment, legal, or tax questions.
Unprecedented.
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 Well, these are unprecedented times.
That's right. These are unprecedented times. That's why we got some mailbox money coming your way.
Welcome to the only show in the country dedicated to helping savers worry less about money, the Worry-Free Retirement, with your host, best-selling author and fiduciary, Tony Walker.
As we record this show on April 20th, 2020, with the infiltration of the coronavirus, one particular word from the media keeps coming up time and time again. And no, it's not COVID-19, but the word unprecedented. And since the word unprecedented is frequently used to describe today's life and times post-coronavirus, let's be sure we properly define it. So unprecedented means without previous instance, never before known or experienced, unexampled or unparalleled, such as an unprecedented event, which I think it's safe to say that with the whole COVID-19 event and the government's subsequent shutdown of the economy, yep, this is truly unprecedented. Let's face it, not in my lifetime have I seen the government take so much control over our lives, over our freedoms, and yes, over our money. But it's not just the unprecedented government lockdown of our businesses and the way we live our lives, but also 4 other unprecedented events that actually occurred in the first 3 months of 2020. That's right, in total. There have now been 5 unprecedented events that may and probably will negatively impact our money and our retirement forever. Well, welcome, folks, to the Worry-Free Retirement. And yes, I am that little man in the sweater vest, Mr. Unprecedented, Tony Walker. And today I'm going to do something I've never done before, and that is to take the first point out of these 5 unprecedented events, something I've never done, and literally, and more importantly, take them and take bullet points throughout the entire show. That's right, we're going to have a bunch of whiteboard segments coming up. Why? Because during these unprecedented times, there's actually 4 very important questions you've got to ask yourself, or if you're working with a financial advisor, you've got to ask them about what to do with your money when it comes to retirement planning. Now, before I share the 4 key questions to ask about your own retirement, let's take a look at these 5 unprecedented events that all occurred, again, just in a 3-month period here in 2020. Number 1, the Secure Act, which basically is going to force your kids to cough up a bunch of taxes that they're going to owe when you die as a result of inheriting your 401k or other retirement accounts. You see, prior to the Secure Act, your kids could what's called stretch that money out over their lifetime and thus stretch the tax bill. But no more. When you die, they're going to have to take this money out in 10 years, and that's a huge problem. Number 2, the introduction of this country to this deadly virus with no vaccine, COVID-19. Now, obviously, you know what this virus has done in the way of creating fear and panic and multiple runs on toilet paper, so I don't have to go any more extremes there. Number 3, the government's response to COVID-19. As I mentioned earlier, folks, and in the previous shows we've discussed this, the last thing any government needs to do is restrict the freedoms that are associated with running our businesses and spending money. But that's what's happened. In one of the worst economic times since the Great Depression, this is what we're left with. The flow of money has stopped, and hopefully, again, this show is being recorded on April 20th, 2020. Hopefully by the time this show is on, that flow of money will have gone back to normal, hopefully. Anyway, number 4, what else have we got to deal with in unprecedented events? Well, the response to COVID-19, just as we have talked about, not from the government, but from Wall Street. Folks, if you've got a 401k, and this happened in just a few weeks, basically that 401k plan went down as much as 30%. Here's the bottom line. Wall Street has to have income flowing into businesses. Those are called earnings. Companies make profits on that money. Without income, without earnings, there are no profits, and thus the value of those stocks will go down. And many people ask me, Tony, will the stock market go back up? I really don't know, because these are such unprecedented times. I've never seen an economy literally shut down over a virus. Now, granted, in 2008, the economy shut down and the market was down for several years, but that was true to an economic downturn in the real estate market, not some virus that allowed us to have to close up businesses. So again, you need to pause, think about where you are. If you're retired or nearing retirement, you got to ask yourself, man, if the market is this volatile, do I still want to continue to risk so much money in it? And then finally, the unprecedented event number 5 is what we call the CARES Act, which was just introduced as a result and a response to COVID-19 and the government's response and the economy shutting down and the government now printing more money to infuse back in the economy. Let's see, $22 trillion in current debt, add another $2.2 trillion to that, and you've got more debt than probably this country can ever pay back unless you got a bunch of money sitting out there that hasn't been taxed. Can you say 401k plan? Either way, none of this is good. So what we're going to do, we're not going to try to predict the stock market. We're not going to try to come up with some magic potion of what you ought to do. This is a retirement planning show. This is not an investment show. What we're here is to give you hope. And what we're going to share with you are 4 key questions. So regardless of how much money you got in your 401k or in the bank, it doesn't matter. You still can retire worry-free, but you better know how to answer these 4 questions. I'll be right back. I'm Tony Walker. You're watching the Worry-Free Retirement. Have you recently retired, been laid off, or offered a pension buyout? Has the company you work for moved, been acquired, or closed its doors forever? And finally, do you have a 401k with a previous employer you'd like to move to safer territory? Then take advantage of this opportunity to move your 401k or lump sum pension to Tony Walker Financial. Let's meet in person to discuss your retirement options. Log on now to TonyWalkerFinancial.com to schedule your free, no obligation appointment. Let us help you today. Today's date is April 20th, 2020. In just 3 months, we've had 5 unprecedented events that have wrecked our economy and put question marks in our retirement planning. But we don't need to depend on the stock market. We don't need to worry about 1 or 2% CD rates. What we need to do is get control over our money by asking 4 fundamental questions. Now, this is how you find out whether you're dealing with a money manager or retirement planning specialist, which is what we do. So let's go over these 4 questions, and I'm going to talk briefly about the importance of each one. The first question is, what do you want? You know, this is an interesting question because most people have never really thought about this. Most people are not asked by advisors what they really want because most advisors really don't care. What most advisors are looking for is to handle the money. Now, there's nothing wrong with this, but to sit down and spend time with a client and try to really figure out what they want, that's a big deal, and you have to know how to ask the right questions. Let's use some examples of what most clients, what I call savers, want. Number 1, they don't run out of money. They don't want to run out of money. You know, think about what's going on with the stock market right now, folks. It went down this past quarter 30%. Now, if you're 40 years of age, 50 years of age, maybe just wait for it to come back. But if you're retired or retiring soon, and you're needing that money and you start drawing it out, well, obviously you start thinking about running out of it. So pretty scary consequences there. The second thing most people want in retirement is they want access to it. Now, we do a lot of annuity work, a whole lot of annuity work, but one of the misconceptions about Tony Walker Financial is all we do is annuities. And that's nothing true about that at all. We have a Charles Schwab platform. We encourage people to keep money in the bank. Why do we do that? Because unfortunately, annuities don't give us a lot of access. So you have to have a combination of investments, and we can show you how to do that, all right? The other thing most people want as they get into retirement, as much as people want to make money in the market, I get it. But again, folks, as you get older, we always take the approach, let's let the game plan dictate all this. Let our worry-free retirement game plan, use very, very conservative assumptions. Let's quit taking all this risk because let's face it, you don't want to have to go back to work with a stock market correction like we've experienced. And then finally, as we talk about in our new book, Live Well, Die Broke, spend it now while you still can. Spend it now while you still can. How do you do that? It's a great question and one that most advisors are not equipped to ask. So these four questions, I'll get to the other three in a minute. These four questions, these 4 bullet points under this question, what is it you want, are key to setting up a game plan for a worry-free retirement. If you want to find out more about this, just log on to TonyWalkerFinancial.com and we'll go through this exercise with you. Now, we're getting ready to go to question number 2. All right, during these unprecedented times, we've got to cover the 4 major questions you've got to ask yourself before you retire, or if you're getting ready to retire, folks. You've got to understand these questions. It's crucial to a worry-free retirement. So let's go to question number 2. Last time we talked about what do you want. Now we got to get into what do you need. What do you need is what we're talking about after taxes, okay? And these are for basic expenses. Now, you may be sitting there saying, well, I don't know what my basic expenses are. I don't even know what I'm going to need money for. This is why we've created a handy-dandy tool. It's found at TonyWalkerFinancial.com. Just go to downloads. It's called the Spending Plan. Now, this spending plan is kind of surprising because a lot of people have never plotted out their expenses. We're not talking about a budget here. We're talking about a spending plan so that when we're handling your money, when you roll your money over to us, what we do is we set up the spending plan to match what it is you need. Homeowners insurance, gasoline for your car, maintenance, food, clothing, the basic expenses. It's not the wants, it's the needs. You've got to understand what you're going to need. The next thing you need is an emergency fund. Now, an emergency fund, a lot of people say, well, 3 to 6 months spending, blah, blah. Now, we don't have any boilerplate rules on emergency funds. What we do, once we go through the planning exercise of what you want, then what you need, then we determine how much we need liquid. Liquidity is the key, not really an emergency fund per se of amount of savings, but money we can get our hands on, lickety-split, penalty-free. So yeah, you've got to have some sort of emergency fund. What we kind of change the name to is, we like to call it a liquidity fund. And we can help you set this up. So folks, if you're sitting there saying, well, I don't have anything like this. I don't know the difference between wants and needs. Nobody's ever talking about this. It's probably because you're working with a money manager. What you need is a retirement planning specialist, someone equipped to deal with these very questions and, more importantly, how to set up a game plan to comfortably retire and enjoy your money while you still can. To get started, log on to TonyWalkerFinancial.com. We'll show you how to lay all this out. We can move your 401k, your pension. We can make sure your savings is working for you. Recently received an inheritance. This is our specialty to help you use and enjoy your money while you still can without the fear of running out of it. All right, here we go. Let's go over now. Let me turn the whiteboard around. We're going to question number 3. Understanding the unprecedented begins with asking the right questions. And now we're on question number 3, dealing with retirement. And that is, how much do you have? You know, sometimes people will come to me and they want me to look at their stuff. Maybe they're 62, 63. I'll ask what they want, ask what they need, and finally it gets around to, well, I got to see what you got. Because we can talk about wants and needs all day long, but we need to know what you've got. And here's the key. On paper versus in your pocket. Now, what I'm talking about here, let's say somebody has a 401k and they come in and they go, oh, well, I've got some money in savings. I got an inheritance Aunt Martha just left me, and I got $300,000 in my 401k plan. Well, first of all, folks, especially if you had that in the stock market, you probably realize as we record this on April 20th, 2020, that's down. And that money, even though it's down, is still not the end result because we haven't even paid taxes on it yet. So remember, folks, what you're seeing on paper, depending on how that account's set up, it may not be really what you have. In other words, all the money you think you got is really not yours. We have to go in and diagnose and understand what is that real number, and we have the ability to do this. The second thing is we have the stock market, okay? The stock market equals unpredictability. Now, a lot of people in our industry, for some reason, they think I don't like the stock market. That's not it at all. In fact, we have well over $80 million of money with Charles Schwab. That's a platform we use to invest some of that money in the stock market. I don't have a problem with the stock market. I've been licensed to sell securities all the way back to the mid-'80s. What I have a problem with is our clientele is what I call savers. They don't like to take a lot of risk. So as a fiduciary, I have to put them in products that are more suited to their level of risk. Hopefully this makes sense. So we're not going to put a lot of money in the stock market. Some of our clients have more than others, but we have to be really careful with the stock market because remember, we're back to what do you have? That stock market is always on paper. Until that money is converted to cash and put in your pocket, we really don't know what you have. This is why I think to have fixed annuities, to have money in the bank, very, very secure government bonds, I like those kind of assets because they're more general to knowing what we've got because they have less risk. And finally, dadgummit, come on now, let's start using reasonable assumptions. Reasonable assumptions. You know, I heard a fellow on the radio, he's still talking about how the market's going to make people long-term 12%. I mean, yeah, if you averaged it out over the last 50 years, nobody had to spend a penny, nobody had any emergencies. Maybe it got 12%, but that is ridiculous. A fiduciary would never even talk about those rates of return. So when you get our income plan, our proprietary software, what I've learned over the years in doing this 35 years, let's assume very, very low rates of return. In fact, I always like to quote Will Rogers, who once said, always expect the worst and you'll never be disappointed. So we're going to assume very low assumptions on our rates of return, and hopefully we'll make even more than what we're assuming, which means less worry for you. If we can help you, if we can go through an analysis for you to see where you stand, to see how much you have, and if it's enough to retire on and enjoy your money, log on to TonyWalkerFinancial.com right now and let's get started. All right, we're getting ready to finish up with question number 4 that you've got to be able to ask either yourself or your advisor. April 20th, 2020, we're quoting the date because who knows, we're running all these unprecedented events that we've been discussing, 5 of them to be exact, and we're trying to arm you with good, solid information. And it always begins with the right questions. Folks, retirement planning is more than just throwing your money in the stock market or trying to pick out some magic number. It's all about coordinating all of your assets with your lifestyle, with the circumstances that are here today, and managing those expectations. That's all this really is. So the 4th question is, when do you want it? You say, when do we want what, Tony? The money you've saved. And with this recent downturn in the market and unemployment at 20%, guess what? Some people are saying, I want it now. You know, some of you didn't plan on having to maybe take money out of your 401k early. In fact, the political pundits and the economic pundits are saying, well, don't touch the 401k. Well, what are you supposed to do? Borrow on a 20% credit card? Look, the 401k, there's no magic potion to the 401k. It's just a savings plan, folks. It's really not a retirement plan at all. It's money you've stockpiled on a pre-tax basis more than likely, and sometimes, even with the tax laws and whatever, you may need to get it now, but only you would know that in working with a trained retirement specialist to see what the implications would be. Maybe you've been laid off, okay? And I'm sure, you know, a lot of you might say this, hey, 3 or 4 years ago, I wasn't expecting to be laid off, Tony. This is why you have your money positioned so that you can get access to it in case you need it. So when you want it might change over the years based on what happens with our circumstances. Another might be a pension. This is happening more and more. In fact, there's a hospital there in Hardin County this is happening. A lot of people are being offered buyouts right now because the companies are trying to shed workers, cut expenses, and many of them want out of these darn pensions. So they're offering you lump sum payments. Folks, this is great news. We can take that lump sum payment, roll that into our worry-free retirement split IRA process, and we can set up a game plan that includes access to your money. Let me diagram this because this is really cool. Access to your money now, and then mailbox money later, okay? What was the old candies and now-laters? We used to sell those in school for 25 cents. I'm surprised we didn't get caught doing that. Anyway, the pensions, the 401ks, we can set up now money and later money. And this mailbox money, unlike the stock market that's not guaranteed, when you kick that mailbox money in, it's guaranteed income for the rest of your life. And finally, when do you want it? Well, you really shouldn't start taking any money out, in my opinion, until you have a written game plan. You know, I've been doing this for a long time, and what I realized, I used to use what's called calculators and retirement software and all this stuff you could get, and I spent a lot of money on this stuff, and I thought, you know what, none of this stuff is really helping because things are constantly changing. Everybody has their own set of circumstances, so what I had to do is take a lot of my own money, well into 6 figures, and create what I call the Worry-Free Retirement Software. Now, this software is unique. Nobody else has it. I know it because I invented it and created it. Nobody else has access to this. So what happens with the Worry-Free Retirement Software, when you work with Tony Walker Financial, we take your information and put it in this software. Now, where is it different? What it's trying to do is show you where everything's located, show you where all the pieces of the puzzle are, and more importantly, which assets we're going to spend first so that we can use and enjoy the money. Then the software shows us, through our expertise, on how we're not going to run out of money. So folks, if you don't have a game plan, no wonder you're so worried about when you're going to take the money out and when you're going to retire and if you're going to make it in retirement. You've got to get that written game plan. And at Tony Walker Financial, we'd love to show you how it works. And of course, there's no cost or obligation to meet with us. We can meet in person, we can have a phone call, and we can also do a video chat just to find out more about our operation and how we're helping so many savers worry less about money. So don't delay. Log on now to TonyWalkerFinancial.com. Let's get started, and I'll see you soon. Well, does the Bible have anything to say about questions? Well, I've come up with 4 important questions that I think every Christian or even non-believer who's questioning God right now ought to be asking, and I've got the answers, and it's found right there in the Bible. Hang in there. I'll be right back. We'll see what the Bible has to say about all of this. Who can you trust? It's one of the most important decisions you'll have to make. Question is, are you ready? Well, we're here to help at Tony Walker Financial. You know, we care more about you than we do your money, and we have over 2,000 happy clients and an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau to prove it. Rolling over a 401k, confused about Social Security, maybe you're afraid of running out of money. Learn how to use and enjoy and protect your hard-earned money. Log on now to TonyWalkerFinancial.com and let's get started.
Win or lose, games are a blast, but playing around with your retirement is serious business. So don't leave your retirement to chance. Get a retirement game plan from well-known retirement specialist Tony Walker. Learn how to be worry-free in retirement with a safe and simple game plan that includes mailbox money for life. To meet in person with Tony, log on to TonyWalkerFinancial.com. That's TonyWalkerFinancial.com.
Today's show is focused a lot on freedom and then what questions to ask to really gain a worry-free retirement. And speaking of freedom, it reminds me back at, I had a double major at Western Kentucky University, and one of those was psychology. And one of my favorite books back then was a book written by Erich Fromm called Escape from Freedom. His premise was that freedom to most people was actually a scary thing, that the reason many people sought religion was to gain more structure over their lives because the freedoms they enjoyed were really too much to handle. I wonder if old Eric would still, if he were still alive, would still wonder about that theory, looking at the way people are losing their freedoms today and how anxious the natives are getting. So let's talk about the 4 major questions that we need to think about when we're thinking about our faith and dealing with things. There's 4 major questions that I think come to mind when I think about my faith and what God thinks about all this. First of all, question number 1, why did Christ come? Well, it's interesting, we've been talking about freedom. Did you realize Christ came to set us free? Free not from government, free not from taxes, no, free from the bondage of sin. In 1 Timothy 1:15, it speaks to this. It says, Christ came into the world to save sinners. In other words, to set us free from the life of bondage to sin. Second question, the question would be of God, what is profitable? We've talked a lot about profits in business and stock markets, but that's not what we're talking about here. The coronavirus taught us one thing: profits are sketchy and iffy at best. And if you're one of those who admits you know nothing about business and know nothing about profits, you should now. Basically, when there is no money coming in the front door, there's no profits. But not in God's economy. You see, even if you're flat broke, he says in 1 Timothy 4:8, godliness is profitable in all things. In other words, when all else fails in the world, you keep pursuing the things of God. Third question, why is it that we suffer so much? Another unintended consequence of this lockdown of our economy is the suffering that is taking place actually outside the normal concerns of the economy. Things such as our health, things such as potential abuse at home, loneliness, unemployment, increased fear, actions even leading to thoughts of suicide or whatever. I mean, suffering of all kinds. So what does God have to say about all this suffering and why we're suffering? 2 Timothy 2:12. It says, if we endure, or if we suffer, we shall also one day reign with Him. You see, Jesus suffered in ways that we can never imagine, yet He had to be sympathetic to our suffering. This is why He allowed a perfect God, Jesus, to suffer to the end and die. And it says we will reign with Him. You know what? 1 Peter 4:1 says the same thing. It speaks of suffering in Christ as a picture that we might be strengthened as we suffer in this world. And the final question we got to ask God is this: what must we do? You know, with everything and everybody out of work, things closed down, one of the questions we're all asking ourselves is, what can we do? You can only walk around the park so much. It's a question we need to ask of God, and one that benefits us is going to work. This is why it's so important to work, to have a paycheck, to feel like you have a purpose. And certainly, though the work is not always that important, we've realized that working in some ways helps us to serve our fellow man. It's a noble purpose to work. You take away work and you take away man's purpose. There's benefit in working, and forcing someone not to work, well, that's a disaster. And what does the Bible have to say about this? Titus 3:8 says this. It has the answer. It says, maintain good works. You know, James would say to keep the faith and continue to work it out. So don't let the lack of work, no matter what's going on in your life right now, you continue to work out your faith, and I assure you that God will be right there at your side. Well, how about you? You're sitting there saying, Tony, that's all well and good, but I don't know if I have faith in the economy, faith in the stock market, faith in other people. Well, let me share this with you. I am happy to simply talk with you by phone, in person. We could have a video chat. I would like the opportunity to share with you our process called the Worry-Free Retirement. And yes, it has endured much of these types of things for years. In fact, one of our well-known thoughts that we have on this is something called mailbox money. It's an opportunity to set up your 401k, your pension, your inheritance in such a way as to have guaranteed income that you'll never outlive. Incidentally, don't forget to download our latest free download on understanding the unprecedented. This is a wonderful tool to understand what in the world's going on and how can mailbox money come to the rescue for your retirement. Log on now to TonyWalkerFinancial.com and let's get started. Well, I hope you've enjoyed today's program. Next week, we're going to dive into a little bit more of these 4 items, these 4 questions, and share a case study with you on how you can get more control over your money no matter what's going on in your life right now. You've been watching The Worry-Free Retirement. I'm Tony Walker. I'll look forward to seeing you next week. But between now and then, you remember, if all else fails, you be worry-free. Make it a good one.